Some people will say to me, how do you justify caring for your people? And I say, I don't even think about having to justify caring. How do you justify not caring? 88% of all people feel they work for a company that doesn't care about them. 74% of all illnesses are chronic. The biggest cause of chronic illness is stress, and the biggest cause of stress is work. 65% of all people would give up a salary increase if they could fire their boss. There's a 20% increase in heart attacks on Monday mornings when people have to go back to work. We don't do this to improve productivity. We don't do this to improve profitability. We don't do this to attract more people. We do it because it is the right thing to do. To care for the people you lead, to treat them no less than you would want your mother and father treated where they work, or your children treated, or your best friend treated. We have this poverty of dignity in this country because we don't know how to treat people in organizations focused on results.
Welcome to Return on Empathy, a podcast brought to you by the Empathy Collective, a community where leaders come together to navigate change without losing their humanity. Whether you are a plant manager trying to humanize the factory floor, a small business owner wanting to build a strong culture that lasts, or a corporate executive striving to prevent burnout in your team, you belong in this community. Visit theempathycollective.com to join our community and use the discount code LAUNCH2026 to get 10% off your membership. Today's episode is an incredibly raw and rare conversation. We are sharing the historic live launch event of our new movement and community, the Empathy Collective. To honor the late Bob Chapman's legacy and uncover how to lead through the intense disruption of our modern workplace, I brought together a powerhouse panel of world-class minds across biotech, finance, manufacturing, and medicine, including the brilliant Bob Quinn, Paula Soteropoulos, Steve Gund, Neal Bakshi, and Dr. Gwendolyn Williams. In an era defined by AI, crushing burnout, and constant organizational shifts, this episode became a living, breathing case study for why empathy is not a soft skill. It is a baseline for survival. Get ready to dig deep, challenge the conventional mindset, and learn what it truly means to lead from the inside out. Let's step into the room. This is Return on Empathy. Welcome, everyone. As you join, please share in the chat where you are logging in from and why you are here. Today, we are officially launching a movement. I am your co-host of the Empathy Collective community, Rebecca Drumai, and my other co-host is Adine Stone, and our vision is to bring together caring leaders like you to learn from each other. We believe that together we can make an even bigger impact on society and the modern workplace. So, to kick us off, look at the chat. We have just launched a quick poll. Let us know, what is your biggest challenge with leading yourself through change? Not your team, not your peers, yourself. Love to see your response to that. Drop your answers now. And I love to see all the diversity of people attending right now. I know we have people from healthcare, manufacturing, biopharma, education, law enforcement. It makes me so happy to see such a diverse group of leaders in this room right now. Thank you for being here.
We're starting to see some results coming in on this poll right now. Managing stress is in the lead, followed by finding clarity.
That's great. No, thank you for sharing your insights on that poll. We will keep that in mind as we go into the panel discussion where we'll be talking about leading from the inside out. Let's talk about why we're here today. We're here because of a vision that leadership is the stewardship of lives. Today's community launch is dedicated to the legacy of Bob Chapman, who proved that business can be a powerful force for good. We're here to recognize an amazing leader who touched the lives of many during his time as chairman and CEO of Barry Waymiller, and collectively make a pledge to carry Bob's truly human leadership torch forward so his spirit lives on. I know we have attendees in the room today from Barry Waymiller who felt the impact of his leadership and are still grieving the loss of this wonderful human. I was fortunate enough to host him on my Return on Empathy podcast last year, and I will share a clip from our conversation that still gives me goosebumps every time I hear it.
Some people will say to me, how do you justify caring for your people? And I say, I don't even think about having to justify caring. How do you justify not caring? 88% of all people feel they work for a company that doesn't care about them. 74% of all illnesses are chronic. The biggest cause of chronic illness is stress, and the biggest cause of stress is work. 65% of all people would give up a salary increase if they could fire their boss. There's a 20% increase in heart attacks on Monday mornings when people have to go back to work. We don't do this to improve productivity. We don't do this to improve profitability. We don't do this to attract more people. We do it because it is the right thing to do. To care for people you lead, to treat them no less than you would want your mother and father treated where they work, or your children treated, or your best friend treated. We have this poverty of dignity in this country because we don't know how to treat people in organizations focused on results.
Poverty of dignity. How do you justify not caring? To anchor us in why Bob's message matters, I am so honored to welcome my other favorite Bob, Bob Quinn, Professor Emeritus of Management and Organizations at the University of Michigan Ross School of Business, and one of the co-founders of the Center for Positive Organizations. Bob, I'd love for you to share some words about Bob Chapman.
I listened to that clip of Bob Chapman and I get chills. It's such an impact on my soul. I met him in St. Louis at a conference. He gave a presentation like that one that was breathtaking. We chatted for a while, made a strong connection. Some time went by. I was on your podcast and you brought up Bob Chapman. And I said, well, let me tell you what I learned from Bob Chapman, what he represents to me. I did that. A few weeks later, my phone rings. Person on the other end says, this is Bob Chapman. I played that podcast, what you said for my wife. You made my wife cry. I said, well, Bob, it was totally sincere. And then he exploded into a 1-hour discussion of every story in his book. I got the whole book in an hour, and it was absolutely thrilling to do that. When I stop and think about it, we have a man who took a very conventional organization, turned it into a global superpower. And the question is, how did he do that? And the answer is, he did what all transformational people do. He integrated differentiation. Now, what in the world does that mean? All of us internalized the conventional mindset. People are self-interested, resources are scarce, competition's natural, hierarchies are necessary, and so on. There's 50 assumptions in the conventional mindset. We learn it as soon as we begin to talk. Bob, one of his central-most stories is a very simple story. He says, I was struggling in college. They dragged me into this job. And then I went to a wedding. And at that wedding, the person officiating the wedding said, every bride, every groom is the precious child of someone. He's driving home and he can't get that out of his mind. And he realizes every person that works for me is a precious child of somebody. And that one thought begins to crystallize into what I would describe as a rebirth, a second birth, being twice born. He begins to see things he couldn't see before. And all of a sudden, the people working for him are no longer transactional widgets. They're no longer objects. They're human beings to be nurtured. Now, what's Bob doing at that point? Here are two separate categories: business success, human flourishing. In the conventional mindset, those are two separate categories. They cannot be put together. They're oppositions. When a person has the experience of being twice born, of that expansion of consciousness, they can put together things that can't be together logically. And all of a sudden, he sees human flourishing and business success together, and here's the key, mutually reinforcing. Business success increases human flourishing. Human flourishing increases business success. Now we have a virtuous cycle. The linear mind, the conventional mind, cannot tolerate a virtuous cycle. It's all about linear relationships. Bob has moved outside the conventional mindset. Now that's the challenge for every single one of us. It's not about human flourishing. It's not about business success. It's about putting those two together in that upward cycle. That's what all great leaders do. And they don't have to be CEOs to do it. So in getting started, I can't think of a better example of someone transforming an entire company from the inside out than the example that you just showed us.
It's a wonderful example of how Bob took the conventional leadership norms and completely turned it on its head. And I hope that all of you in the room today are encouraged to do the same thing, even when you have naysayers surrounding you. So I'd love to hear from Brian Wellinghoff, who is very close with Bob. He's partner at Chapman Co. Leadership Institute, and he's one of the masterminds behind operationalizing truly human leadership at Barry-Wehmiller. So I can't wait to hear your perspective, Brian.
Rebecca, thank you for dedicating this to Bob's memory. It has been a blow. I am looking in the chat and realizing how many people he's touched through his book and speeches and those things. But I hope that we continue his legacy, not in memorialization, but in action that we take going forward in our own organizations. As Bob Quinn was saying, I've had the honor for 23 years to be one of those precious children of Bob Chapman in our business. And we have 12,000 of them around the globe right now. But I was struck even by the video that you showed this morning about how important care was to Bob. And I think his conception of care is so closely fused with the conception of empathy we're going to be talking about through the balance of today and moving forward. That never became more clear to me than when I walked into his office about 20 years ago and said, you know, Bob, what we really need to do is we need to teach people how to listen. And Bob, in the way that he always was, looked back at me and said, Brian, that is the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my life. Why would we need to teach adults how to listen? When people come into our organization from great universities, from past experiences, from other companies, why would we need to teach them how to listen? But to his credit, he allowed us to move forward with a pilot. And I want to recognize that that was done in association with David Vandermolen, who brought to our organization great ideas on listening. And we did a pilot about listening skills. And it was a 3-day class, 3 days around listening and communication skills. But the fundamental nature that we found to be true and that Bob espoused throughout his entire life was if you want to create empathy and connection with people, the most fundamental skill is that we need to listen. And simultaneously, if you want to create great business results, if you want to be creative and come up with new products and serve your customers and clients well, you need to be able to listen effectively. And so Bob became a great proselytizer around this idea of listening. And for those of you that knew him, one of the great things we've said about him over the last few years is that near the end of his life, Bob was really great about talking about listening. He was a great advocate for all of that. But I think that's because listening came to be a challenge for him. It's a challenge for me. I dare say it's a challenge for all of us because it takes something inside of ourselves that we need to bring forward to the future. And so, if I leave you anything as we begin this time together, please care for others. Please empathize with others by being great listeners in this space and in the Empathy Collective going forward. The one other thing that I would say, which was very important to Bob, was that we can't just tell people to care. We need to teach them how to do that. And that's why we created Barry-Wehmiller University to talk about listening and other things. That's why Bob talked a lot about changing business education with people like Bob Quinn and others who are trying to change the narrative in our business schools. But he also said that one of the most powerful ways we can care for people is with a strong business model. And so, yes, it is about direct interpersonal empathy, but it's also about thinking about how we build the structures, markets, systems, processes that can really bring to life the best of everyone in our organization. And it's just such an honor for me to represent Bob and his thoughts. And I'm excited to see where all of our panelists and speakers bring those ideas as we move forward. And so, from the bottom of my heart, Rebecca, thanks to you and to everyone who keeps that message going in various different ways.
Thank you, Brian. I always love hearing that story, and I actually want to give a shout out to David Vandermolen, who's in the audience today, who worked with Brian. And so, if you have questions about listening, Message David. So speaking of listening and leadership tools, I'd love to bring that energy into this room right now. So we're going to respond to a question in the chat, but don't hit enter until I say go, okay? We're going to hit enter all at the same time. So type into the chat, what is one word that describes the truly human leader you aspire to be? And maybe it is a better listener. So think about it, type your response, and then we're going to hit enter at the same time. All right. 3, 2, 1. Okay, hit enter. Let's see the responses. I want to see them all flow through. What kind of truly human leaders are we going to be? Grounded, compassionate, connected, authentic, courageous, loving, listener. I love this. Genuine, beautiful. I hope Bob is looking down right now from the skies above and smiling. This is wonderful. So I'd love to get us into our panel discussion now. We just saw the incredible impact of Bob Chapman's legacy. Now we're going to talk about what it means to be a truly human leader and navigate change from the inside out. So before we get into the dialogue, I just want to say one of our scheduled panelists, Dr. Monica Warline, can't be with us today because her mother was rushed into emergency heart surgery this morning. Because this is an event about being truly human leaders and Monica dedicated her career to studying compassion, I'd love for all of us to show some compassion for her right now. Before we begin the panel, let's take a moment to leave a quick note of support in the chat. You can say whatever you like. My team will take a screenshot of your notes and we'll send it to her later this week so she can read it when things quiet down. Monica, we love you and we're thinking of you. I was trying to find a piece of Monica in my office and I found her book, Awakening Compassion at Work. So Monica, we love you and we're keeping you in our thoughts. Okay. So we are joined by 5 world-class leaders bridging academia, biotech, finance, medicine, and manufacturing. So very diverse industries. And I'm going to briefly introduce each of the panelists before we launch into the discussion. So panelists, if you could just give us a little wave when I introduce you. So we have Steve Gund, who is president of the Gund Company, and he also operationalized Bob's leadership philosophy at his company. So great leader to have with us today. We have Paula Soteropoulos. He's a biotech CEO and board director, incredible entrepreneur and leader. We have Neal Bakshi, who is a best-selling author and a former Wall Street investment banker. We have Dr. Gwendolyn Williams, who is a physician and is an associate professor of medicine. And then you already met Bob Quinn. He's going to be substituting in for Monica. Fortunately, they were colleagues at the University of Michigan, so it makes for a very seamless substitute. So nice to have you on the panel with us, Bob. So Steve, let's start with you. You knew Bob Chapman closely. He proved that leadership is the stewardship of lives. When organizations go through intense shifts, leaders often panic and look outward at numbers. We're seeing that right now as we speak. What does it look like practically for a CEO to manage change from the inside out the way Bob did?
Rebecca, it's such a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for the humbling honor to be able to speak on such an important topic with such outstanding thought leaders. Bob Chapman introduced me to Bob Quinn back in 2019 at a Washington University event, and I've been inspired by his work ever since. His words today about Bob have been so insightful. I had the pleasure of meeting Monica just yesterday, coincidentally. And of course, Brian's been a mentor of mine for over 10 years and really helped me deeply understand the how behind humanistic leadership. Brian mentioned today the importance of listening and caring for others. And to see David Vander Molen here on the call today is very special for me because he specifically taught me how to listen at Barry Waitmiller, of course, over 10 years ago. So David, you should be very proud of the impact you've had on me, on our organization, and the communities in which we operate today. But to your question, Bob Chapman certainly changed my life. He changed me from the inside out. He connected the dots for me in my life in a way that I hadn't figured out on my own. In essence, he awakened me with this deeply profound statement. He said, business is the conduit for providing an opportunity for people to become who they're meant to be. Think about that for a moment. The purpose of business is to serve people by helping them realize and fully utilize their blessing. Quite seriously, he gave me the meaning of life for me in business. I knew that all meaning and fulfillment in life came from serving others, from loving others. Yet I had not connected the dots that I could find that meaning, that fulfillment in business by intentionally and articulately building a culture that focused on taking care of, serving, and loving, yes, even loving folks at work. He challenged me to discover my why, and with the help of Simon Sinek's insights, as an organization, we found our why together. Our company's why became to recognize and serve others so that lives are transformed. It really had nothing to do with making widgets, but it reflects Bob's point that our product is our people. And frankly, to your point, I had to change from the inside out by discovering my why so that our organization could discover its why. And I'm eternally grateful for Bob, for helping me find my calling in life. So by building a culture of care, we have learned from Barry Waymiller and Chapman and Company how to listen to our team members, to Brian's point, how to capture hearts and minds, how to engage and empower team members to unleash human potential. And to a point Bob Quinn was making, unleashing human power has our company soaring to new heights because we have harmonized individual flourishing with organizational flourishing. And that's the gift that Bob gave us.
And what a wonderful gift. And I love how you talked about finding your why and how your why has nothing to do with the fact that you're a manufacturing company. And I think that's the message that we need to take away here is that when we're focused on human flourishing, it's about the people, it's not about the product. If you focus on the people, the product will deliver. Thank you for that inspiring story. And I mean, talking about leading from the inside out, Neal, I would love to dig deeper into that because you went through your own personal transformation some years ago when you were working on Wall Street. And you know very well the executive suite can be incredibly lonely. So, how do you think a leader can navigate that isolation, that feeling that leaders often get when they move up the hierarchy without losing their heart or their strategic edge?
Yeah, Rebecca, I think you're absolutely right that as you move higher up in the corporate hierarchy that we currently usually see companies structured as, it gets a little lonely at the top. And as a lot of participants responded at the poll, a lot of people look to you for that sense of clarity. And ultimately, I don't believe that heart and strategic edge are mutually exclusive. I think the best leaders are actually the ones who have the ability to lead with confidence yet humility, to know that they don't have to do it alone, and that in the end, there really is no one who is self-made. We're all made with the collaboration, cooperation of one another. And I believe that when you create a environment in your business, in the office setting of genuine human care or empathy, as well as gratitude, it allows the experience to feel safe for people to authentically share their ideas. I've seen all too often that the boss who leads from fear or who believes they have to do it alone often won't get the best voices in the room heard. And that'll sometimes lead them to not having that strategic edge. And I think what we've also seen for maybe the past 100 years, we've believed that shareholder value and extracting the final basis point from margin is what delivers that strategic edge. But as we're seeing now more than ever, the companies that people want to work for and buy from show that doing well and doing good are not opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you lived that experience when you were in Wall Street, and now you're helping leaders reset and find their inner selves and tune into that inner peace as well, which is wonderful. You took your own stressful situation and turned it into a way to help others. So let's shift gears a little bit to another industry, biotech. So I'd like to hear from you, Paula. And we all know this industry is defined by rapid innovation, high failure rates, and intense board governance. When everything is shifting externally, how do you maintain your personal integrity and maintain your team's humanity when things feel chaotic or uncertain?
Yeah, firstly, Rebecca, thank you for having me during this panel. Wonderful focus, and I'm really honored. One thing with biotech, we've talked a bit about the why. In biotech, we have a very strong why in across the industry, and it really is changing human health, bringing medicines to patients, and that is a lot of what every company. Not every biotech, though, I think, can maintain its humanity and integrity, though, as you say, during some of the times of chaos and rapid change. This is an industry where we have high stake risks. Science fails often. Clinical trials fail. We have issues of getting funding because this isn't something where an investor funds and then a couple years later they get a return. It could take 10, 15 plus years for them to see a return. Medicines take a long time, and it really takes a lot of perseverance, commitment from companies and the people in the company. But I always go back anchoring the company on our why and always keeping that as the forefront of like a North Star. Because when something is tough and we think about maybe shifting gears or having to change direction, what are we doing that is really going to bring value to the patient? And that will always result in better business. And teams, knowing that anchor is absolutely important. That's one thing. But the other thing is, I think I have found that, and this has been mentioned before, authentic leadership is absolutely in this type of company. Younger in my career, I don't know that I was as authentic, and I was trying to be the type of leader I thought I was supposed to be. When I started to really show who I was, what was important to me, what was my why, be more open and transparent to the things that may be difficult, and showing, okay, I can make mistakes. When I was more authentic, that really brought a lot more, let's say, or allow people to feel that they could be authentic and being able to take risks on people. And it's okay to make mistakes. And that sense of safety that Neal mentioned is absolutely huge in an organization, so that they can make mistakes, can take those risks. That builds resilience in the organization. So when something really does go wrong, which it will in biotech for sure, there will be something that does not work. It'll take longer. We'll have less money, resilience, and the team can pull together and find a quick solution. And I've seen that in places where I've been a CEO. We've had some tough times where we've had to make rapid pivots, and the only way we did that is a culture where people had a North Star, our patients felt safe, be finding to make mistakes, and to be able to pivot.
I love that. And I'm seeing a connection between Steve's message and yours with connecting to that why and how important that is. You have to start with that. And then from there, build out that resilient org structure. And I love your point about resilience stemming from authenticity and empathy. So when I saw this, a lot of people typed in the chat, what kind of truly human leader do you want to be? Authenticity was one of them. Authentic leader, genuine. So people are striving for that right now. And you are a living example of how that authenticity plays out in successful leadership. So thank you for that. Gwen, I'd love to turn to you. So we're shifting from biopharma to healthcare now. So we've talked a lot about burnout in healthcare. And you know very well that corporate pressure manifests very acutely into this burnout that we're seeing in your space. You champion what in the healthcare space is there, everyone seems to be calling it moral courage. I love this term. And so when a system like the healthcare system is fracturing before our eyes, how can leaders cultivate a genuine sense of belonging so their people, so the staff, the practitioners can still sustain that well-being?
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you for that. In healthcare, and I've led campaigns, for burnout and moral injury and well-being for healthcare workers. I will die on that hill. But I think we've made burnout the headline, but it's really the signal and it's the symptom of moral erosion of our people. Burnout tells us something is wrong with the environment. Something is inherently deeply wrong with it, the environment that people are working in. So during times of disruption, of fracture, chaos, leaders are taught to focus on productivity, financial performance, operational, efficiency metrics, everything that makes us. And those things matter. I'm not naive that they don't. We think they matter because they're tangible. We see them, we measure them, we can track them. But there are other forces that are just as important, the intangibles, belonging, well-being, kindness, compassion. And I think the deeper question that we have to ask ourselves is, what is it costing our people to keep the system functioning? What is the cost of that human extraction? So what does it take to in healthcare, doing more with less? That's a common motto at a lot of healthcare systems. But what does it take to keep plugging the leaks or patching up the cracks in the casita or holding up the pillars of an enterprise when the foundation beneath our feet are constantly shifting like tectonic plates? Because belonging is not created by a wellness initiative or mission statement. And I really wish it was. I really wish we were there as a society, but it's created in everyday small decisions that and actions that leaders make that people receive. And sometimes we mistake shared struggle, collective exhaustion, and even trauma for true belonging. And that has to be a differentiation when the C-suite or the titled leaders are looking at it, because they're not the same. To create belonging and to have a true foundation for well-being, you have to be brave enough to ask yourself a few questions. And that is, very simply, do people feel safe to speak up? Do they have psychological safety? Can they challenge without fear of repercussions? Do they believe they'll be listened to and not heard? Because people always say, we heard you. I hear my daughter all the time. I'm not listening to her all the time, So, but listen to, but also to be received and witnessed when they bring up a concern. So that's where moral courage really begins. Moral courage in its simplest form, and this is my own definition of it, it's the willingness to simply do what is right, even when it's uncomfortable, when it's unpopular, and especially when it comes at great personal risk. And that's a definition that comes from my own upbringing, from my parents and how I was raised. We think of moral courage, like somebody like me, I'll speak truth to power. I will challenge every leadership, that I'm working with or for. And sometimes it is, but sometimes that courage can look like from the vantage point of the leader as saying, we got this wrong. Thank you for telling me and being brave enough to speak up. We're going to do it better. And then actually doing it better. And my favorite is saying I'm sorry and simply meaning it. That's what builds the trust. That is what those moments build trust. And, trust is the foundation of everything. Everything, every human relationship every sentient relationship is built on trust. So trust isn't a reward for belonging. It is the prerequisite for it. So when leaders are consistently demonstrating humility, kindness, curiosity, integrity, empathy, compassion, people begin to believe and feel, I matter here. My voice matters here. And that is what belonging should look like. And that's what it should feel like. Because people don't need perfect leaders. They need human ones. And I think the greatest measure of leadership today, especially in healthcare, isn't whether people can endure the systems that we felt. It's whether we built a system worthy of the people we've asked to serve.
Well said. And it's actually a really great segue into the next question I have for Bob Quinn, who talks about the twice born leader and leadership excellence. And I felt like you just mentioned the perfect example, Gwen, of moral courage and how leaders have to, in order to demonstrate moral courage, they need to, ignore the naysayers. They need to step into the zone of discomfort and do something that might be outside of the usual leadership norms. So let's talk about that a little bit, Bob. I'm going to hand it over to you. So thank you again for stepping in for Monica. I originally wanted to ask Monica about scientifically designing thriving systems for compassion, which has been her work for the last couple of decades. As one of the founders of Positive Organizational Scholarship, you look at this through the lens of purpose. And I know you have a lot of talks on finding your purpose and purpose-driven leadership. You also talk a lot about human potential. How do we build workplace structures like the one that Gwen aspires to see in healthcare, where empathy is the default that unlocks that organizational excellence?
Let me feedback some things that I've heard from Steve. It's about leading so that people become who they were meant to be. Interesting statement. Neal talked about bosses and fear, and that's a big variable. Paula said, when I become authentic, other people find the courage to be authentic. And then we just heard from Gwen, the ability to belong is based in everyday small acts. Barbara Fredrickson wrote a book called Love 2.0. She had to define love scientifically. The definition was energy. When I give you a bit of energy that you value, then we create attraction and love. Over time, those accumulate. All it takes, however, is for me to engage in one act of hypocrisy, and all of that disintegrates because I bring back all that fear, etc. So the question is, how do we create these structures? Bob created structures. He created a listening course. He created policies. He did all those things, but it began inside Bob. Now, here's the state. If Anjan Thakur were here, he'd say, if this stuff is so good, why isn't everybody doing it? That's the economist's question. And there's an answer. Because this is brutally hard work. And here's the thing that I think all of us can take away from this, and that is authenticity is the opposite of hypocrisy. I spend endless periods of time in hypocrisy, and I bury it and hide it. It stinks. I don't want to smell it, right? And Bill Torra once made a statement that was invaluable. He said, the way you build integrity is by constantly monitoring your lack of integrity, your hypocrisy. Now, there's like 8 beautiful faces on the screen, beautiful people. And every one of us is a hypocrite. We slide into hypocrisy all the time. The key is going back to that statement that her parents taught her about its moral courage is doing the right thing. I don't do the right thing all the time. I fail all the time. The structures that we build for having empathy across the system are a function of one person constantly reducing their hypocrisy and increasing their integrity, acting with courage in uncertainty, learning by faith, creating a collective capacity to learn by faith. Those are not things we teach in business school. They're things that Gwen's mother teaches us, right? And when we live them, we develop the capacity to do them. So I think all of those structures begin with who we are. We create the structures, and then we have to maintain them every minute of every day by managing who we are. And authenticity is what drives all those things.
I mean, I love that. And what I'm hearing from all of you collectively is that in order for you to be successful leaders, you've had to dig deep inside yourself and uncover the question, who am I? What do I represent? What is an authentic Bob, an authentic Paula, an authentic Gwen? What does that mean? And how will I show up in the world as a mother, as a wife, as a leader, whatever your role is, right? So that's the message I took away from all of you, is that we really need to dig deep and think about who we want to show up as before we can then go serve others. So I'd love to wrap up this panel discussion with a really fun rapid fire lightning round. So each of you have 60 seconds to answer this question. So we'll just go through one panelist at a time. So the question is, what is the most courageous, truly human leader or action a leader can take this week? So all of you attending today, what is one thing you can do this week to anchor yourselves and your team through change? What's your advice? 60 seconds or less. We'll start with Steve.
Personally, I think it takes great courage to embark on a personal why discovery. Following Simon's process, we have to look deeply into the positive, meaningful experiences in our life, but we also have to examine the challenging, potentially negative experiences in our lives that shaped who we are today. By being grounded in our individual purpose or why, I think it's much easier to embrace necessary change and development that aligns with our why. So the organizational why discovery process can be just as profound and just as meaningful as we seek to change in alignment with our purpose. Encouraging others to have the courage to discover their purpose and live their why can have a very profound impact on people's lives. And that encouragement, I think, is truly human, to really discover who we are and what our why is.
I love it. Finding your why. Let's do it. Neal, what do you suggest?
I would say active listening. And what active listening specifically means to me is replaying back what you heard from the other person. And we heard Brian talk about this in his dedication to Bob. We heard Gwen talk about this. We heard Bob talk about this. And I believe that most people listen to respond, they don't listen to understand. And what a truly human, courageous leader can do this week is actively replay back what they heard someone say, because feeling seen, feeling heard is oftentimes that sense of grounding that you really need to offer your team to be able to move forward in that capacity.
I love it. I think we heard that from all of you today, how we're all striving to be better listeners. So great skill. Paula, what is your advice?
I think it's actively having a really honest conversation, and especially if you are managing change right now. You need to tell your team what you know, what you don't know, what won't change. People aren't expecting certainty. They just want honesty and clarity. It is worse when you're trying to protect them and not share information that can serve them, especially when they're going through tough times, and to pull collectively together. And I think also asking your teams, what do you need to be successful? And so I think it's a truly human act of leadership isn't having all the answers, but creating that safe space again for people to bring their real questions, but to feel that you're being honest about where you're at, but have obviously clarity and confidence of what you're going to do to navigate forward. But again, leadership isn't about having uh, concrete answers, but it's providing that safe space for people to have clarity.
I love that. We heard that in the poll too, right? That people we're struggling with that clarity piece. So hopefully that advice helps folks who are struggling with that. Gwen, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Beyond, telling the truth, even if you're not certain about it, is the most, I think, courageous thing a leader can do this week is to choose curiosity before certainty. When leaders stop trying to have every single answer, they start asking much better questions, having the curiosity of your teams and even of yourself. And you can create the conditions for trust, for learning, for innovation. And I think something that will bring that all together is, knowing and staying true to your morals and your values and your guiding principles. They don't change, from when go from your car into your, office space or something like that. They're consistent throughout. And I think when you lead with those guiding principles, you inspire and encourage other people to also lead from their morals and their values.
I love that. And I think that ties in nicely to the listening piece, right? You can't actively listen if you're not curious to begin with. So one wonderful skill. I always tell people, try to pretend you're 5 years old and you're just asking why is the sky blue? Why, go into a conversation with that level of curiosity and you'll come out having learned a lot about the other person. So Bob, let's wrap it up with you. What do you have to say about being a truly human leader? You might have to take yourself back off mute.
What I just heard were 4 words: purpose, listening, authenticity, and curiosity. We could think about that as not as 4 separate words, but as a state of being. When I'm at my best, I have all those characteristics. And so the question is, how do we get there? And so if I return to the very first one, purpose, I ran an organization for a number of years, and I had a very strange pattern. Virtually every person that came into my office, I would ask them the same question every time. What result do you want to create? That was a very unsettling question because most of the time people don't come into your office because they want to create a result. They have a problem to tell you about. And the question, what results you want to create, they almost never have a good answer. So you ask it, and then you listen and you stay with authenticity and curiosity, and you have a dialogue until they clarify their answer. The moment they clarify their answer, they become listeners, they become authentic, they become curious. You have a new kind of conversation, a new kind of culture. So I think our challenge is to lift every person in our network into this state of virtue that we're talking about. And I think the way you do that is you go back to that purpose thing and you help every person find their purpose in this specific interaction. What result do you want to create? Once you start doing that, an amazing thing happens to the organization. After a few months, they come into the room with answer to the question before you ask it. And then it starts to spread into the culture. And so if I would try to put together everything I've heard today, it would be learn how to ask that question. And that doesn't mean saying the words, what result you want to create. It means saying those words in a state of empathy and authenticity and curiosity. What we're doing is through emotional contagion, we're bringing change into the world and we're making everybody line up with Gwen's parents. We're creating that courageous ability to do what's right in uncertainty. And we do that by clarifying purpose and bringing those virtues to the surface.
I love that. I love that. And it's such a wonderful way to wrap up the dialogue, just thinking about that question and contemplating how we want to create positive results and be that truly human leader that we all aspire to be. As we wrap up the panel discussion, we have a couple of questions that were submitted from the audience. Now, we got quite a few questions, and I'm sure there are some questions in the chat as well. We will respond to those offline because we don't have time to respond to all of them. But we did get a question from Louise, who is the founder of Rivulets Consultancy, and she is a former senior operations officer at the World Bank. And I love her question because it really encapsulates everything we've been talking about around organizational culture. So her question is, how is your organization's ethos? So this is its shared values, beliefs, and guiding principles. How is that ethos supporting the AI and business disruption decisions you are having to make today so that your organization and your people continue to thrive? So I'd love to hand it over to Gwen for this one, and maybe Bob and Brian can add some additional comments.
Well, thank you, Elise, for this very difficult question. It's a very difficult question. I'm not going to lie. I'm a vulnerable and an authentic leader. So the truth is, in my industry, in healthcare, they haven't fully answered that question yet. AI is advancing at an extremely extraordinary pace. The velocity at which it's advancing, sometimes we feel like we can't really keep up with it. And the policies, the ethical frameworks that are needed to guide it are actually evolving alongside with it. So I think a different way of thinking about your question isn't whether our values support AI, but it's whether AI is challenging us, or how AI is challenging us to live up to our values, and maybe in new ways that we've never thought of, because in moments like this, our values are becoming less of a statement that's, on the website or on the wall, and more about shared decision making of this framework of navigating, the future of technology in any industry, navigating the uncertainty of it, but doing it in a very human-centered way.
I love that. I'd love for you to add some flavor to that response.
Well, Rebecca, I'm happy to jump in there, and thank you again for everything today. AI is transforming our world. And like any great transformation or change, our organization's ethos should be at the heart of the response. So I was literally in a meeting yesterday in Barry Waymiller where we are coming out with our AI philosophy. It's in the third version, getting ready to cascade because it ties directly to our truly human leadership methodology. But I'll say personally for me, I want to give us all hope. AI is going to be disruptive. And like any new tool or technology, it has the potential to be used in negative ways. But I actually think it could be one of the most positive things for our world in bringing out more truly human leadership because we have a way to bring AI into our organizations in a way that supports the good work that people are trying to do and make them more effective and make them more impactful. But also, I believe AI will demonstrate to us even more so the importance of listening skills and communication skills and empathy skills and interpersonal skills because more of the technical things will be handled by AI and that will leave us to the opportunity to be present and connected to other human beings. And I'll leave it there, but so passionate about the opportunities AI has for this area.
So next week, I'm doing a session with 30 executives from a consulting firm. I asked them to all submit one question, their most authentic leadership question to me last week. If you read those 30 questions, 30 out of 30 of the questions begin with AI. And they then present fear and some kind of strategic orientation. If you continue to read those questions, not on the surface, but deeply, what you end up finding is deep, deep human need. And it is so, so striking because Brian is the fourth person this week I've heard say the result of AI, when it all plays out, is the valuing beyond anything we've known before of authenticity. AI gets better every week, and it's going to replace all the analytic capacities. So a consulting firm that exists on analysis, which most of them do, is very replaceable. So what in the world does a consulting firm have to offer? It has one thing to offer: to bring the human judgment in that system to the most authentic level of the client system and give that client system something it's never had before, something consulting firms don't give. It's calling for a revolution, the exact same revolution we've been talking about all this hour. It's about the organization itself moving to a new level of flourishing, authenticity, and learning so that the other organization, one being advised, is able to learn. Now, I find that incredibly exciting. Is it disruptive? Absolutely. Are we going to suffer? Absolutely. But it's an opportunity. The people on this podcast are better positioned to take charge of that opportunity than most people on the planet. So I find that very exciting.
I love that. And that segues so nicely into our final wrap up for this session and our call to action. So speaking of a revolution, before we officially open our doors to the Empathy Collective community, we wanted to reward one of you who showed up live today to champion this movement. So while the panel was speaking, our community manager, Sarah, was running a live random drawing. So we're going to announce the winner of a physical copy of Bob Chapman's Everybody Matters book, the recently revised edition. So Sarah, did we do that drawing? Who's our winner?
Yes, we did. It's going to go to Neal McConnell. Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, Neal, but you are our winner today.
Congratulations, Neal. We will reach out to you separately to get your mailing address so we can mail you a copy. If you already own it, please gift it to someone who needs it. All right, cool. So as we wrap up this historic hour, I want to take a step back. Today wasn't just about launching a community. It's about officially opening the doors to a home, your home. We built this community because we realized that truly human leadership shouldn't be a lonely endeavor. You shouldn't have to shield your team's humanity or fight for workplace compassion by yourself. We need a safe sanctuary where leaders can gather, recharge, share messy realities, and learn from each other. So right now, a link is being dropped into the community chat. As you can see on your screen, we want to fast track your onboarding into this community. All you need to do is use the promo code LAUNCH2026 right now to lock in 10% off your membership. And if you refer 2 community members by July 31st, we're putting a physical copy of Bob Chapman's newly revised book right in your hands. So, Neal, congratulations, you won a copy. But if you refer some other folks to join the community, we're happy to put this book in the hands of as many people as possible. So to invite your peers, you just go to your profile, personal settings, and invite. It's super straightforward. We have our first welcome session on July 29th, followed by our first empathy espresso session on Monday, August 3rd. So we're a very active community. We have a lot of fun stuff going on. And I just want to make a quick note. The easiest way to sign up is using your mobile browser first. And then once you sign up, you can download the Mighty Networks app and log in to participate. So to close us out and send us forward, I want to pass the microphone back to Bob. Bob is my personal hero. You probably could feel that and sense that throughout this conversation. I would love for you to share why taking action today is so vital for leaders watching this session right now.
I think that we are not objects. I think we're processes. We're verbs, not nouns. And as processes, we're increasing in consciousness, capacity, understanding, ability to function, or we're decreasing. And those processes are very, very complex. When we take seriously the things that we've talked about today, and we turn them into a discipline, a practice, we tend to turn up and we tend to grow. When we're not growing, we tend to shrink. When we shrink, we're of less value to ourselves and less value to the people around us. When we're expanding, when we're thriving, flourishing, not only do we grow, everybody else grows. And I think the message that I hear from this panel today is that's our purpose. That's why we're here. And so I can't think of anything much more inspiring to pay attention to than the messages, Rebecca, that you're bringing to us every week. And I'm deeply grateful for you and what you're doing.
Well, beautifully said. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much, Bob. And thank you all for being with us today and taking time out of your busy day to be with us. Once again, click on that link, use the code LAUNCH20 to come be a member of our community, and we can all do this together. You do not have to do this alone. Thank you for your time, your energy, and your commitment to being truly human. And have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And if you would like to join the Empathy Collective community, visit theempathycollective.com and use the discount code LAUNCH2026 to get 10% off your membership. Life is too short. Let's take care of each other at work so that together we can make this world a better place.